Welcome to My Psychedelic Roots, a podcast of conversations with people from a broad swath of lived experience to explore their psychedelic beginnings or roots, what led them to start using psychedelics, what those early experiences were like, and how those roots have impacted their life's unfolding. My name is Amy Bartlett, and it is my hope that these stories, generously shared by my guests, offer perspective and insight into the lived reality of psychedelic experiencing. Please feel welcome to subscribe and follow the show to get the latest conversations in your podcast feed. And you are always invited to share this episode with others if you feel inspired. And so, as always, whoever, wherever, and whenever you are, welcome. I'm glad you're here. In today's episode, I sit down with Pedram Dara, an Iranian-born refugee to Canada and a former MDMA-assisted therapy clinical trial participant who has turned his experiences into leadership, founding and directing the Psychedelic Lived Experiences initiative, which is a patient-led movement advancing lived experience expertise in psychedelic research, treatment, and policy. I know Pedram as an active member of the Ottawa psychedelic community, making connections and contributing his voice and expertise in a variety of spaces and initiatives in the city, nationally and internationally. Since 2019, he's combined his 15-plus years of experience producing media, building projects, and connecting people across disciplines with a passionate commitment to patient safety and treatment efficacy. His story has been featured in documentaries, training programs, news media, and scientific journals. And so it was a treat to sit down together to talk about how his current advocacy work is built off of his early experiences as a child growing up in Iran. We talk about some of the confusing messaging that surrounded him about drugs as he was growing up, before eventually talking through what led him to having his first therapeutic psychedelic experience to help heal his PTSD in a clinical trial setting. It is a rich conversation, and Pedram's self-awareness, vulnerability, trust, and balanced approach are on full display as we wend our way through his story. A real pleasure. Also, a quick reminder that this episode contains mentions of suicidality. This warning is meant to empower you with the knowledge you need to make healthy decisions about how and if you should consume this podcast content. We invite you to practice self-care and do what feels right for you. And if you need support, please connect with someone who can help. Family and friends, professionals, or a crisis line. There are both Canadian and international recommendations in the show notes below. You are not alone, not in your pain, nor in your healing. And so with that, let's hear more about Pedram's psychedelic roots. Pedram, so great to have you here.
Hi, Amy. Yes, I'm happy to be here.
Before we jump in to hear a little bit about how you came to the psychedelic space, what do you think is important that people know about your background and life today?
Sure. Thank you. So these days, I'm involved with a sort of a grassroots patient-led initiative that I started actually on the day of FDA advisory committee meeting when I knew sort of FDA would not be approving MDMA. So it's June 4th of last year. Was that last year before? Oh my God, I can't remember. Anyway, everybody knows that June 4th. So that day when I saw how FDA and Lycos were making decisions on future of a patient population without the patient population having a voice in the room, that was the day I was like, okay, I need to do something about this. I need to then go on and do something with my own experience because I participated in MDMA therapy for PTSD 6 years ago here in Canada. And I had been doing advocacy work generally, but I think it just finally gave me what I needed, sort of like a laser focus on the importance of lived experience and why people with lived experience should have a voice, why they should be at a table. So I launched this initiative, and the main thing we are doing is a summit. So we're organizing a virtual summit next month in November, where I have 27 people with lived experiences who have gone through psychedelic treatments legally, and then also have 27 clinicians, researchers who then they will be talking about like what are the barriers, why are we not doing this, what are the opportunities, or those that are incorporating lived experience, they'll be sharing how they're doing it, what are the best practices around that. So I'm in a way bridging clinical science with lived expertise, and that's really the area of focus for me right now.
And I'm so glad that we have you and that you're focusing on this. It's such an important part of the psychedelic space and so important to make visible. So thank you for all the work that you're doing. And I'm interested to hear more about how you came to take up this mantle. And so I wonder, Pedram, if we could talk a little bit about your childhood and your life before psychedelics. Thinking back to your younger self, how would you describe your way of seeing the world or what felt true to you then?
Such a philosophical, deep question. It's like a therapy session here. I love it. I think when I look back, I always remember myself as a problem solver. Like, I'm like a typical brown engineer guy that, everybody was like, oh yeah, you're gonna be an engineer, like just like pulling up the vacuum cleaners, never knowing how to put it back together. So like I was always attempting to solve things and fix things and like sometimes things that were not even broken. So like I always remember myself having this two things that I wanted to fix things and then I had big dreams, right? And
Mm.
but the big dreams would change. Like I think there's definitely I've been struggling with ADHD over my life, undiagnosed, never really looked into it, but properly as I should probably at one point. But I feel like I've had this sort of like really intense getting like excited about something and then going all in on it and then eventually losing interest and then finding the next thing that I can go on. And I think, when I'm 41 now, I feel like I've done that pretty much since I was a child. But yeah, those are the things that I do remember before, as a child, just wanting to do big things in life, wanting to like change systems, wanting to like, yeah, like, like who knows? I mean, I'm a child of a revolution. So I was born like just a few years after revolution, right? So it's like, I feel like I'm always going to be revolutionary, even though I had nothing to do with the revolution and I don't even approve of the revolution. But nonetheless, I feel like it was something around that I always, to this day, that I feel like I've always wanted to like change things from inside out. So that hasn't changed since I was a child.
And perhaps this is connected, but I'm curious, what was your relationship to wonder or spirituality or even altered states of consciousness when you were a child or before you encountered psychedelics?
Almost zero, I would say. So growing up in a country of like, Islamic Republic and dictatorship and things like that. So eventually religion was something that either you sort of like people either go all for it or you're like, I want nothing to do with it, right? When you see how it was used. So I ended up falling into the category of well, like, I don't know or anything to do with that. So my family were not religious, like when I said not religious, like, there's a sense of like we're all born Muslim in Iran and everybody like might have like believe in God or whatever, Muhammad Ali. They might have even throw these names, but they don't necessarily go to mosque. They don't necessarily like my mom was not covering her hair. We're not doing prayers at home. So it's like spirituality or religion had like a very thin layer in my life. I would say,
Mm.
as a young kids growing up, the sort of the value of it. If anything, I was more exposed to the terrible parts of it than the good parts of it, especially how it was enforced in schools and things like that. So that I would say perhaps contribute to me to getting closer to being an atheist and be like, hey, how can there be a God with such suffering? I just couldn't as a kid or even growing up believe that there can be a force up there looking after us, yet seeing such immense suffering of innocent people, including children and teenagers. And I'm like, I just couldn't understand that there would be a reason behind this. So I would say nowadays, perhaps psychedelics have, in a way, made me not so much want to cling into either way. So, like, I sometimes even struggle using the word atheist now because now I'm a little bit like, maybe I just don't know. I felt like that came from a place of like, if I already knew, right? As if like I know there's nothing. I'm like, well, if I don't know there is something, I also don't know if there isn't something. So I feel like with psychedelics, I'm becoming a little more like agnostic. It's like, yeah, I just don't know. I'm just becoming more okay with I don't know, and
Mhm.
and also nobody knows, right? So I'm also not falling for other people's opinions of either or. So I'm just staying in this curiosity.
I think that's perfect and, speaks to that curiosity around the material and, like, taking things apart and putting things back together, like, it feels like the same kind of energy, so lovely. I'm curious, Pedram, did you grow up in an environment where psychedelics were ever discussed, or how did people talk about or think about drug use?
So growing up, I never heard of the word psychedelic as a thing. And growing up in Iran, opium is a thing everybody does, and hash. Those are the two go-tos. So like you start with smoking hashish and cigarettes, and people, that's like a very typical thing. Pretty much anywhere in Middle East, you see that. And then as you grow up a little bit, and then you start noticing in your uncles and older cousins and all that, you start seeing like, like pretty much, I would say more, maybe half of the population, if not more, use opium. And
Mm.
it's traditionally, obviously, it's been around. So it's so cheap and easy and accepted. There are parts of Iran that today, like you go to somebody's house and instead of bringing you like tea and fruits, they might bring you the opium pipe as a way to, welcome you. So there's that traditional ceremonial thing with it. But that usually happens, let's say maybe not like in big cities and not within young people. So like to me, drugs generally growing up were seen as something bad and negative that destroys families and like some of those typical stuff. Nonetheless, I would witness people in my own family use it. And so it was confusing, right? So like I would have my own grandfather and my uncle and my cousin. So that's three generation. I remember seeing them all sitting in a room with all the other men and smoking opium together, like 20 men, like multiple generation. This happened like every Friday. And it's like all the women in the kitchen talking, cooking, whatever, and all the men in the room smoking opium and, playing backgammon and drinking tea. That's the way people here drink alcohol. Right.
Exactly.
So it was always confusing. On one hand, all these bad things you hear about it and you see it. On the other hand, it's pretty integrated and normalized within the family environment. So it was pretty confusing, I would say.
Yeah. So it sounds like growing up, you had a lot of curiosity, there was a lot of energy, there was a lot of looking around you and not really agreeing with a lot of what was happening and wanting to understand or to push back, that revolutionary sort of nature that you experienced. I'm curious if that played a role in moving towards psychedelics or when they first became part of your consciousness. Was there a particular moment or conversation or experience that made you consider trying psychedelics for the first time or just being curious about them?
Yeah, I mean, I'll touch on a few like recreational experiences that I had. So, like 4 years after I came to Canada, when I was like 24, I was able to go to school. So I went to school, and we had like maybe like first 2 3 weeks of this like really intensive school program with all these like international students and like typical students get together and party. And so by this point, I'm 24. I've been in Canada 4 years. I've done yeah, no psychedelics to that point at all. Yeah, I think I tried mushrooms once with like another friends group thing, but I think maybe I just took a gram of it, and I never had like this like crazy experience. It's just a little bit of like silly laughing, as if like it was like socializing. So it was never really a deep experience. But that very first MDMA experience that I had in that party with those students was very interesting because it was like maybe 5 or 6 of us, and then everybody was partying, dancing, and feeling energetic, like all the typical things I had heard about ecstasy. Back in Iran, I heard about the word ecstasy, but again, I never used it there. So I knew what it was, as in like what it does. It's like it makes you happy and you want to dance and like blah, blah, blah. I knew about that. So all of them went on doing typical MDMA experience, and then I went to the bed and crawled under a blanket.
Mhm.
And I was like,
Yes.
what? And then I tried it another time, and the same thing happened. So rather
Mhm.
than me wanting to go out, it made me want to go in. It
Mhm.
made me feel safe in my own skin. And it's like I was enjoying that so much, as if like it wasn't like as if I was not okay with going in. It's like I just did that was feeling much better than trying to go and talk to somebody, because I'm like, I can't do that other times. But this right now
Exactly.
feels good to just be me and my skin and my bone and my body and like safety. So now it makes sense to me why I responded like that. Not knowing that obviously I had all these traumatic memories that I had pushed away. And obviously during MDMA and then later on, I heard from other people with traumatic history that there's a pattern here. It doesn't happen to everyone, but there's a pattern there that people are like, oh, I was in a festival, everybody was like dancing, but I went back to my tent. And I've heard of stories like that from others too. But I didn't have this therapeutic container around it. I had no mental health education. I didn't even know what was happening. Only now, honestly, makes sense to me why I responded like that. which means that I never saw them as, again, as like a therapy tool. So that all came maybe 11, 12 years later.
Wow, a long
So there
time.
was this gap. Yeah, absolutely. There was this huge gap. So like by the time I got into the MAPS study, maybe the last time I had done MDMA must have been 6 years prior. So it never became a thing that I'm gonna go do, which is again, like that's why I'm sometimes like bothers me when people worry about like people getting addicted to some of these things. I was like, it made me feel good. Don't get me wrong. I felt as much as with those two experiences, but I don't remember ever be like, I should go buy another. I should find someone to buy MDMA for another Friday night. It just didn't happen. Like, look, I
Yeah.
went on for 6 years, not
Mhm.
because I couldn't buy it, not because I didn't know a guy, but but you know what I mean. But it wasn't like that. The way honestly is with cannabis or alcohol, right? So
So you had a couple of experiences with MDMA that were different than what other people were experiencing around you, and you noticed that, but again, you didn't pursue it until you went and participated in the MAPS trial. I'm curious, so you felt safe in your skin. What were those experiences like for you, and how did you come back to earth after them?
yeah, the very next day of the very first MDMA experience was very interesting, even though I remember not long two there are two really sharp memories that I have from that very first experience. One was that this friend of mine was so his house was across the block and he's like, "Oh, I need to go to my house and get something. You wanna go together?" So like now we left this party, which was I think our own house if I remember correctly. So like him and I just walking outside in the real world
Mm.
influence of MDMA for the first time, like, I get goosebumps not even thinking about it, right? I was like, "Wow," like, I just saw the work 'cause it's different. You're in the house, I'm in a blanket, whatever, like, once I passed through that and then, like, like, I was in this other, I guess, the peak, you could say, and then maybe the anxiety went down a little bit. So, like, when we walked outside, it was I mean, just, like, witnessing the real world, like, the traffic lights, cars passing by, buildings, like and like experiencing the sense of safety, even though there were like immediate threats around me, like, on the streets, things that like, I don't know, before maybe I would see a homeless person, I feel like a little bit weird. And I didn't feel that, or like cars passing by, like just like some of these small things that like, my hypervigilance usually would be aware of, feel like those weren't there. And I remember just walking back from his house to the house. I was like, God, this is like this is crazy. I can't even explain this. How could it be like you could just feel so safe? And also feeling like how much I could connect with people that I barely knew. Like I only met these people maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. They're all from like different countries. This person in particular was from Brazil. Like, like first time I meet someone from Brazil. And like, but as in like if we knew each other forever and there was this like sort of like deep connection and trust that was built on such an early part of this like school program that I think it really carried. Like that group, we just ended up becoming much closer to each other. We ended up supporting each other more with our schoolwork. And yeah, it just in a way really, I think, amplified some of those connections with these new people. So those are the things that I remember in terms of
Hmm.
the experience.
That's really beautiful in terms of the connections that you were able to make and trust and sort of, like, relax into, and also perhaps a little bit shocking the contrast in how safe you felt and what that says about how unsafe we feel sometimes in the quote unquote "real world." That would have been a bit surprising, I imagine.
Yeah, perhaps that was it, right? It's just like, it was like, oh, okay, so now I actually know how I'm not feeling safe all the time. If this is what feeling safe in your body feels like, then clearly my ordinary state is where I'm feeling unsafe. So yeah.
And I wonder then how that lack of feeling of safety moved you towards participating in the MAPS clinical trial.
Yeah, so then I went on, what is this? Like at that point, I'm like, yeah, so I went on all my 20s, all the way up to like my mid 30s, around like 33, 34, I became a father.
Mm.
And really that was a very pivotal moment for me because again, like, I had my PTSD is like, I'm like a functional PTSD, right? So it's like a lot of people like me exist out there that it's like, you're so good at masking it that we're actually very like high achievers, the A players, we're very accomplished, like, like, like it's very hard to know what's beneath the surface. If you don't do the questionnaires and you're just looking at the individual, you would never guess. These are like, I remember that the very first screening that I did with my therapist in the MAPS trial, and these are people by then, like they've been like therapists for like at least 10 years, right? So like they've seen people like me before, right? Obviously. And then they still met me. They're like, what? Like looking at the answers you gave to their questionnaires and the person is sitting here is very hard to believe. Right? Like they were actually
Hmm.
suspecting. I was like, is this real? Like, how could it be? Like, you're just so good at masking it. And I was like, I probably had to do this. Like, took me 15 years to learn how to mask that because I needed to survive. Like, doesn't matter how traumatized you are, you still have to pay the bills, right? You still have to put a house above yourself. You still have to go work. And to do that, and because I came to Canada alone with $50 in my pocket, bunch of 5 words of English in my head, and that's so I had to go on and survive. There's no time to deal with
Hmm.
stuff like so not because I wanted to, just because I was forced to do. And then when I did that for more than a decade, well, then that became the norm. The mask is the norm now, if
Hmm.
anything, right? So that yeah, that was the main thing I think, just that I had developed this sort of like yeah, these like thick walls around myself as a way to protect myself in the world, but then I had lost touch with my inner world as a result of that.
It sounds like you obviously knew about your trauma enough to apply to be part of the MAPS clinical trial. Were you nervous to apply?
Extremely nervous because this would have been the first time that I would be telling like a mental health professional, in this case, a psychiatrist, that, for example, I had become suicidal, that I had, borderline caused like domestic violence in my own house because of my, anger outburst. And now I'm letting someone know. So when I found out about this study and I called psychiatrist the first time, I'm not knowing anything about it. I just like, and I called it in the worst moment of my life, perhaps. And when I left that message and I was like, here's how I'm feeling, here's what I just did, I hang up so scared. I was like, I'm going to jail now. He's now going to call the cops and tell them that I just told him. And I was extremely nervous. Yeah. And then he called back 4 times. I didn't answer the phone.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
just like different numbers. Eventually answered the phone, but yeah, that's how nervous I was.
And so when you were accepted, what was that process like for you of moving into your first therapeutic MDMA experience? Did you feel supported? Did you feel, I mean, probably nervous? What came up for you in your preparation?
I had, I think, a good healthy amount of both being excited about or hopeful about something that I'm gonna do, and at the same time being super nervous about not knowing what this thing actually is, right? Because like,
Mm.
okay, sure, I knew about MDMA based on those two experiences, and whatever else that knew about people taking MDMA in clubs and raves and festivals, and but about PTSD, as much as I struggled with the 15 years, I had no mental health education around it. Like this is the year 2018, and like maybe 1% of what I know now in
Yeah.
terms of mental health. Like I had like no mental health education, right? So and I had never really faced that part of myself. So this connection, if anything, that what draw me to psychedelics was this connection. But the first time I heard about MDMA therapy for PTSD, like these two, like being super geeky nerdy, I would say, is like just created a hole in my brain that like is this gap that I needed to feel somehow. I was like, what? Like MDMA? That to me that means drug dealers and like bad people and like I don't know all the stigma, everything else, and then PTSD was military and police and government. It's just like at the back then, right? It's just like I'm like, how can these two even be connected? Like what? Like I saw the headline and I was like, I need to know everything about this because how can these two even be connected? So learning about it more, I think I was nervous definitely, but again, as some maybe others with PTSD might resonate with that, it's like very black and white, right? So like all in or all out. So once I said I'm in, then I was all in, Then now my PTSD is going crazy as if like this is the next thing that I'm like clinging on, right? But not as like an enemy to take down, but as more like the area of focus that is gonna go into it and all of my
Maybe
energy.
like as a kid with the vacuum cleaner.
That's it, right? This is I was like, wow, okay, so let me go all in. And I would go on with the vacuum cleaner too. I would be like 5 hours there. I would forget to eat, I would forget to do everything. So it was that. It's like really going all in on it. And that meant I read the entire manual, 80 pages of the therapy manual. I
Mm-hmm.
watched every single video on YouTube. In 2018, I got to the bottom of YouTube videos on MDMA. It was not a
Mm.
video on MDMA I did not watch into that. Today, good luck getting to the bottom of YouTube. In 2018, I arrived to the bottom of YouTube search
Well done.
on videos on MDMA. There wasn't many.
Mm-hmm.
2018, before Michael Pollan book, was a
Yeah.
very different time.
So you had this curiosity about the connection between MDMA and PTSD. You were aware of your PTSD. Why did you think it might help you?
It made sense to me my background after my sort of professional work before I got to the MAPS trial was that I was working in the software world. So I was like
Mm-hmm.
product manager, using technologies like programming languages. We were like creating algorithms and like that was my world. And then I learned about this, and then it made sense to me as psychedelics were technologies and mental health issues were problems. So just like in software, you have a problem and then you use software and programming languages to solve that problem,
Mm.
right? But the languages themselves are neither good or bad, right? The one can argue is like C++ better than Java, whatever. Like it is what you do with it, right? It's not the languages themselves, but nonetheless, they're tools, technologies and tools that can be used to solve problems. So for first time ever, I saw my own life as a problem or product that I was gonna work on. Cause I'm like, how is
Mm.
it that I had to spend like all my life and like working on all these like $1 million projects, all this like big corp work that I had done, but none of it was about me. Everything was about others. And I had never allowed myself to feel like just as important as the movie that I worked on, or as the software that I launched, or as the conference that I put, whatever I had done up to that point. Right. So it was like, okay, this is the first time that I can actually accept that there is a problem here. Just like in my work, when I accept there is a problem and we need to solve. So like not being in denial that
Mm-hmm.
there is actually a problem to be solved. And if anything, for first time ever, I'm going to allow myself a period of time as part of this trial to give myself this container to work on myself, which I had never done before, right? So when it made sense to me that I can use this as a time for myself to do this, and these are tools that I can use to solve this problem, I think that helped my anxiety go down. I had some other anxiety around this happening at McGill, and sorry, at the with the psychiatrist that was affiliated with McGill. This is in Montreal. I knew about all the bad stuff that has happened there. So like,
Yes.
I remember going into it, like, is this run by CIA? I asked
Mm-hmm.
this question. Don't get me wrong. Like
Mm-hmm.
in the prep sessions, and actually they were kind of ready for it too. So I think they really handled it well, and they were not surprised for me. They're like, yeah, like anyone reading about psychedelics in Montreal and Quebec will probably have that concern, So again, thinking like this was for like military and all that, I was like, is this government run shit? Like what's going on here? Like, so those were still some of my concerns back then. So I was nervous about some of these things too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Generally just like being really nervous about like letting this private part of me out and just like handing my psyche to two individuals that I just met.
And so what was that like? How was
Terrifying
your
at
Yeah.
first until I got to the office. Like during the phone
Mm.
conversations, was a lot of like, oh, like, I spoke to obviously research coordinators. I spoke to, like 2, 3 different people. But like, I feel like the day I walked into their office, which was the initial sort of assessment day, like walking in and not seeing them in a white coat, not seeing a clinic. It was this beautiful, like loft office, like honestly, like a tiny little sign there that had the name of the doctor on it. It did not feel like a clinic. There were no, like I said, nobody in white coat. It was not a hospital setting. It was like I walked in, I had to take my shoes off, and like this sort of like immediately just like seeing their faces when they opened the door. I feel like it was like water on fire. So like I immediately felt safe in that environment.
I'm so glad that that environment felt so safe for you. That's such an important part of preparing to be vulnerable in these substances. So I'm so glad that that was well prepared and offered.
Yeah, and even though it was their first time ever, I was their
Mm.
participant number one. They had never done this work before legally. I don't know if they've done it illegally. I've never shared with me, but definitely I was their first time ever that they were doing this as part of a climb. So I was patient one, participant one. because to set some context, there was 6 or 7 other people who in BC received immunotherapy as part of the phase 2. I think early somewhere around 2000, maybe 10 to 14, 15, maybe even before that. And then it was shut down for a while. And then this site opened up in Montreal in 2018, and it was just for these 2 therapists to complete their training. So all the MAPS therapists in phase 2, before they could go on work on phase 3, they had to complete training. And
Mhm.
as part of the training, they had to do one experiential case. So the study that essentially I participated in I was their experiential case for their training. But they
Mm.
just packaged that as a phase 2, right? Because you
Mhm.
could do phase 2 for various reasons. So this was the reason back then. So both of my therapists actually had gone to US back then themselves. They had permission to receive MDMA themselves. So they had experience with that, which definitely did make me feel safe. And they told me they had that experience themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically it was one site, one participant across Canada.
Wow.
So essentially I became the first participant outside of BC to ever receive a legal psychedelic clinical trial in Canada in 2018.
Mm.
Definitely first in Quebec, because this had never been done in Quebec, but also never outside of BC.
Wow. What an honor in a way. I don't know if it felt like an honor, but
I think that later on,
mhm.
right? Like I think later on when I learned more about it and I found out about like actually how many people were applying for such studies, like, again, when I was going into it, it was so naive. Like what is maps? Like I knew nothing about any of this world. So like I just went into it like a typical patient might learn about any sort of clinical trial. Like you might have cancer today and you learn about clinical trials and some cancer treatment, you go into it. It's not like you're going to study the world and the field around it. You just want to get help. So I
Yes.
went through it that way. So I don't think I really even understood the significant. I just remember on the first MDMA dosing session,
Mhm.
my other co-PI she came from Toronto to Montreal just for how historic that day was. She was the first time she's like, just so you know, like today we're handing you an illegal substance as part of the clinical trial, and this had never been done before outside of BC. I was like, what? Like that was the day that I felt like, oh, okay, there's some significance here. But I think
Mhm.
I only really appreciated all of those stuff actually later.
Yes. Well, maybe we can talk a little bit about that dosing day and that first experience. You had obviously, as per the clinical trial protocols, done a lot of preparation with how would you describe them? Your therapists, your support
Therapists, yeah, they
staff?
call them study therapists. Yeah.
Mhm. And so what was that come up like in that first dosing session?
Also anxiety provoking. Actually, I remember during the prep sessions, there's one thing that I worked out from this trial that to this day I feel like gave me a tool, because some of my critique for this work is that actually it doesn't provide participants with tools. Like
Mhm.
that's the downside of, we can touch into that. I feel like that's the downside of inner healing intelligence, right? Because like has its purpose, and I get it, and I think we could touch on that later. But I think the downside of that is that that inner healer may not have access to certain tools. So someone like me at 35, I did not know that if you breathe from your belly instead of your chest, you could calm your nervous system. Like it's insane that I had to learn this at 34. Right? Not 30, I think it was 34. I was like, "What?"
Some
So during
people
the
never
prep
learn.
I
Yeah.
know. So now I use it all the time, and it's such a basic tool, right? So during the prep sessions, they're like, "Hey, during the onset, when you take the medicine, perhaps the first half an hour to 45 minutes, you might actually feel extra anxious. You might feel like losing control and all the things that actually is the opposite of what you're hoping you would experience." And so what are you going to do when that happens, right? So, and then I asked them like, what am I going to do? They're like, well, we can practice this. So I actually had, during the prep sessions, I lie down on the same bed, and so, that I was going to do the dosing day, and like I practiced what I was going to do, and I, started breathing like one hand on the belly, one hand on the chest, so that I could understand that I'm
Mm.
doing it correctly. And that immensely helped me, because on that very
Good.
first dosing session, exactly what they told me did happen. As it was coming out, I was getting very anxious. I sort of like, oh, like what's happening to me? Because, this is the first time I'm experiencing it with eye shades and headphones, right? So those
Mhm.
experiences, there was no headphones, there's no eye shades. So I'm still, I can see the world this time around. Like, like I can hear, I'm almost only hearing music. I can't hear these people in the room. My eyes are closed, and I think that was intensifying the anxiety.
I'm sure.
The breathing really helped me calm down.
Good. Was there a moment you remember when the anxiety broke, or did it just sort of trickle away?
It was very slow. I felt like it wasn't like in an instant. Maybe it took like 5 or 10 minutes, and then I felt like it was like this a slow progression. Whereas like the anxiety was going down, and then sort of this like feeling of safety was coming up, as if there were like two different tracks. Where one was going down, the other one was coming up. So it was a slow progression towards
Mhm.
the other side of it.
And then presumably you did start to feel safe. The effects did start to take over. How did that experience then unfold for you? Did you interact a lot with the support team? Was it more of an internal experience? How did that unfold for you?
I think it was pretty 50-50 for me. Like, I'm generally a talkative person, and I think obviously MMA even can make you more talkative, but I think I knew, again, having read the manual, I knew that it was more recommended that you actually spend more time in yourself with your inner world, because I knew I had these integration sessions where I could talk more. So, and they kept also reminding me about how, like, they rather me spending more time inside during these dosing sessions than unless it was like some massive thing I really wanted to say. So I was aware of that, meaning like there were moments where I felt like I wanted to express, I wanted to like say something, and then I would like ask myself like, oh, like, do I need to? Like, could I just keep going right now? I'll remember it. I can say it later. I remember experiencing a bit like that, not knowing when I should take the things off and speak about something, and when to go back in. But generally, I think, yeah, probably spent like 60% of time in during that day. What I do remember is that I started thinking about like my journey to Canada, like how I came as a refugee and that like 2.5 months, and sort of like my index trauma. What qualified me for this study was the things that happened to me on my way to Canada. And so just thinking that this is what I'm gonna finally process after like 15 years. So I just started like sort of like a timeline, think of my life as if like, oh, I was there, and then I went there, and then I went there, and then I felt like I arrived at a door. I literally felt a door that I wasn't ready to open.
Mm.
That is the time I remember, like, I think taking the things off and talking about that, but like, like not that I see a door, but I feel a door here. Like, I feel like I arrived, I felt safe to get to this door, but somehow I'm not ready to open this door. And luckily they were like, well, you don't have to open that door at all. Like, you could just be here wherever you are. You have 2 other sessions. You're just in the beginning. We have lots of time. It's totally okay. And they normalized that experience. So I didn't feel pressure that I needed to open
Good,
this door, or like, yeah, let's talk about that. What does that door nothing. It was like,
good.
oh, so there's a door. Okay. Like, not even why are you seeing a door? Like, not even like typical therapy stuff. Like, what does that make you feel? And uh, some of these are the parts that I actually enjoy about this treatment. So because it really gives agency back to the individual. It's like, like
Exactly.
that door doesn't necessarily have to be a good thing or bad thing. It's just a door, and I'm not ready to go. Well, we'll leave it at that.
Mhm.
I really appreciated that. I was like beginning of like feeling like I actually have control. I have
Yes.
agency. I can decide how deep I want to go, when I want to go, where I want to go, and I really appreciate that. I think that by itself has started this process of letting me trust the process, as they say.
Yeah, that's well put. Yeah, so much of trauma and having traumatic experiences is having our choice taken away. And so to be able to feel the choice that you had, whether or not we confront the trauma, that corrective experience of feeling choice can be so profound. I'm so glad you had that experience.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm so glad I didn't open that door. I wasn't ready.
Mm, yeah, only when we're ready and
Yeah.
not a moment before.
Yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to enjoy that feeling of feeling safe. Like, to me, like, that's just, like, safety in my body. I was like, "I wanna stay with this." I
Mhm.
wasn't ready for more material. I was just like, "Let me just enjoy feeling safe after, like, 6 years." Because, like,
Yeah.
again, like, I had not, I had no memory of what feeling safe felt like in my body. It had been 6 years up, and those were, like, some of the harshest years of my life, at least the 2 years prior to that. So it was all, if anything, extremely feeling unsafe. So I had like no memory of safety left in my body, even from the
Yeah.
earlier MDMA experiences. And sort of the body keeps the score thing, you could say, also has this, I feel like with MDMA, at least this unfair advantage was this, that I feel like this is score that it's not necessarily negative or positive. It's just a score. And there's something that's going to change in my body. And I felt like that first MDMA gave me this unfair advantage. It's like once I experience what safety felt like, then the sort of the suicidal thoughts were like, they were in a way like they didn't have a strong case anymore. As if there was a debate between me and my suicidal thoughts in a courtroom. And now I finally had an evidence to show to the suicidal thoughts that no, wait, there is actually a state of being where you could feel safe and maybe you don't need to end your life. Like now I have evidence for that. So walk me through your case now. I felt like the suicidal side had no counter narrative anymore. So that very first safety that I experienced sort of like I was like, okay, so I can see why I didn't want to be around because I didn't know this exists. Like almost made sense to me that why my suicidal thoughts.
Mhm.
And I'm like, well, now that I know, it's like once you know, you cannot be unknown. It's like now that I know this exists, like yeah, it's just like that was the fundamental shift towards just like hopelessness that I was feeling.
Yeah. And so how did it feel coming back to Earth after learning something so significant about being on Earth?
Actually, towards the final maybe hour or two of that first dosing session, like when I started experiencing sort of, oh, I guess I'm coming down now. Like it was, like some of those feelings are like sort of diminishing, and I remember expressing that to the therapist, and they're like, I was experiencing this sort of like mind, body, soul alignment. This is how I was experiencing it to them prior to the calm down. I was like, this is the first time I feel like all these parts are like in some alignment with themselves, and I was enjoying that obviously. And then as I felt like this was going down, I started like panicking again. I was going back to the anxiety side was coming up again, right? As in like, oh, so first of all, this doesn't last forever, and like, what am I gonna do now? And like, and that was the first time that they sort of started telling me like even if the medicine is wearing off right now, like the fact that your body remembers this space that you went in when you put the headphones on and the eye shades on and you go like you can continue staying with that. We have another 2 hours and then see what happens. And honestly, I did that. So I put the headphones on, put the eye shade back on. I went back in, even though it was like towards the last maybe 90 minutes of it. I remember I got another maybe half an hour of this similar feeling that I thought I was losing. I feel like, oh, there's still some in there, like just, and then
Mhm.
I experienced that even later, on the following days. And to this day, there are days that when I'm really, struggling, I recreate that environment for myself, right? So I put the headphones on, I put the eye shades on, I put some of those songs, and yes, I'm not having that experience, but again, my body has kept a positive score from that experience. That just me allowing myself to go to my bed, cover myself with a blanket, put the headphones on, the eye shades, put the music, like everything else was the same, except I'm not taking MDMA now, right? But the body somehow still remembers all these other things that brings a level of safety. Right? So it's like if I had from that day on, somehow putting the eye shades on and the headphones on and going under a blanket, allowing myself to have like an hour for myself has become a way my body experiences safety. This only came to me as a result of this trial. I never had this. And now this is something it's like the belly breathing. This is now something I can always do, whether I have MDMA or I don't. It doesn't matter, but I can at least always do this. And my body has a memory of safety attached to that.
Wow, what an embodied experience, Pedram. And how lovely that you can continue to tap into that same experience again and again with and through your body. That's really special.
Yeah, to this day, where like I did a guided meditation with somebody the other day, and then they're like, think of this place where you felt safety and everything went like that's the therapy room. It's not my
Right.
own house here.
Mhm.
Back to that therapy room. Like that is, like that's what I remember. I was like, okay, like I'll just picture myself there.
Amazing. I love that. So from that safe space that you got to experience, what is your relationship with psychedelics today? And how do you think about your relationship with them?
So interesting. I was actually 2 nights ago here in Ottawa. I was at a psychedelic medicine event or something, and then someone randomly was there who was friend of somebody who doesn't even work in psychedelics, and this person works with atomic energy.
Mm.
Canada, like like some like crazy government job, whatever. And as soon as he said that, I was like, "Oh, thank you for being here," because at times I have noticed psychedelics are kind of like atomic energies, right? Like
Mm.
high potential, high risk. And I asked him, I was like, "Can you point out to something that is high potential, low risk?" He couldn't. I was like, "Well, there we go." Like it's literally like so my relationship with psychedelics today are this like high potential, high risk. We cannot just talk about the potential without the risk. And every time something has high potential, we'll always like, look at AI today, right? Like high potential, but also high risk, right? So whenever there is something like that, you need regulators. The same way when you're gonna bring like high voltage electricity to a house, you need to regulate that down. When you bring natural gas to a house, you need to regulate that down to the level that is safe to be used, right? Funny that we call Health Canada's FDAs of the world also regulators. Like, that's what they are. They we need those there, right? We need regulators for atomic energy, right? We can't just be like, "Yeah, everyone can just go and play with atomic energy," right? So, like, they're to me, they're that powerful.
Hmm.
But power, again, is something that is positive or negative. It's like a knife. I can peel it fruit with it or I can kill somebody with it. But so, like, what does power mean, right? So that can be powerful in a way that gives me something, but it can also be powerfully ruining somebody's life in a way that like, like I speak to some people as part of this summit now, like people do really those that have experienced harm, they're like, my life has been hell for the last 3 years. Like these are sentences I hear on a regular basis.
Mhm.
So, and I'm like, okay, so to me, my relationship is this high potential, high risk. We need regulations. We need to know who should do this. We need to know when they should do it. We need proper screening, right? Like we can't just be like, yeah, everyone should do like early in my own experience. I was like that. But now that it's been 6 years, I'm not like that anymore, right? I'm all like, let's amplify nuance. Let's not do just quantitative work. Let's not just read papers and thinking that's how we understand risk or even benefits. So my relationship with it now is this that like they have a place in our society, but I don't see them as like they're gonna solve all of our problems and global spirituality and like by 2070 we're not gonna have traumas in the world and like once everybody's psychedelics and I don't see the world like that. I come from parts of the world that I won't believe that anything like that will change the world. And if anything, these are non-specific amplifiers for some people that are already terrible. They're just gonna bring more terrible out of them. So clearly, we are seeing real examples of that. Like if this was gonna work, then Elon Musk would have been a different person. So this is the world that I'm living, right? It's like I'm finding myself neither wanting to be like pro. Everyone should do it. It should be everywhere, like the way let's say cannabis is available in Canada right now, but I'm also nor like, "Oh, these are like all like terrible drugs. Nobody should touch these, and like they should always just stay illegal, and there's no medical or any other benefits in them." Like I just don't resonate with any of those two extreme ends of it. I feel like there's so much more nuance in there, and I'm just being again going back to like just being more okay with the not knowing, and let's just figure
Mm.
it out, and let's not like have any sort of extreme views on them, whether pro or against.
Yeah, I think, again, that sort of resonates with how your path brought you there in the sense of watching, observing, being curious, being open to changing your mind when new information and evidence becomes available. Like yeah, that's a clear pattern and through line in your story. So lovely
Yeah,
that
thanks
that
for noticing that,
continues.
but that really is that. You're right.
Mm.
Yeah, it really is it.
Yeah. Pedram, this has been such a lovely conversation, and I'm so grateful to you for sharing your story. I'm curious as we begin to wrap up the conversation together, is there anything that you'd like people to know or parting words that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I would say for those that wanna do this work or whether for themselves or helping others, I would say try to talk to people. Like, don't read the papers. Don't. Like, literally, don't. Don't read the papers. Go talk to people, right? Like, don't if all you do is you're reading papers, you're going to conferences, you're catching webinars and online, if that's all your understanding of psychedelics are by taking an online course or even a university course, don't get me wrong, is like, if you don't have that lived experience yourself, go tap into the lived experience of others, right? If you don't have it, it's fine. You could be a brand new doctor or therapist who want to do this, or you could be a patient who's never done this. Try to talk to people with lived experience as much as possible and let that inform you when you don't have that lived experience yourself, right? Because they have learned a few things. So might as well go ask them, how was it? And when you do that, please try to make it as diverse as you can. Don't, again, only go talk to somebody who's had incredible experiences, because they're only going to tell you that. And if you only talk to those who have been harmed, they're only going to tell you about their harm experiences. And that may not be the case for you, either of those, right? So like, try to get a good understanding, like a good balance of like, here's when somebody worked for, here's somebody that didn't work for, here's somebody who's so, and try to get that more qualitative side of things rather than the quantitative side that the pharma companies and FDAs and the Health Canada will deeply care about, which is really not the full picture.
Well said. And thank you for amplifying lived experience. And, your upcoming summit about patient experiences in clinical settings, I think, is going to be really important. We'll have links in the show notes if people want to learn more about that. It's coming up in November.
Yeah, 21 to 23. Yeah.
Perfect. So people can find out more information. Pedram, it's been so lovely to sit down together, to spend time together, and to hear your story. You speak so thoughtfully and eloquently about, some of these really tricky and vulnerable topics. And, I'm really grateful that you were open to sharing and for all your contributions to the psychedelic space.
Thank you, Amy. Yeah, it's lovely to be here and share my story. And thanks for giving me the opportunity.